Hi, everybody, and welcome to SECUDE's web session on a trending industry buzzword, BYOD, or Bring Your Own Device. And we're going to be talking a little bit about securing data in the mobile world. My name is Aparna Ju, and I am the Technical Product Manager here at SECUDE. And along with Michael Kummer, who runs our operations here in North America, we'll be taking you through today's storyline. Is everybody you're probably aware of that there's this rapid expansion of the BYOD culture and mobility trends in the forefront of these technological advantages that businesses are using today to promote collaboration within employees and essentially basically increasing employee productivity in the process. But it also lends itself to some unique challenges, and particularly in security. So today we're going to cover these trends and challenges and what the current security landscape looks like, as well as some new mitigation technologies out there to help us. So on behalf of the SECUDE team, we're really excited to be telling you this story today and appreciate your attendance as well as your attention. So one last thing before we dive in, throughout the presentation, we've got about 3 question breaks where we'll answer your questions in a very brief manner. To input those questions, if you will please take a look at the Q&A section, which is, I believe, on the top of your webinar screens. Just put them in there. We've got a SECUDE team monitoring those, and we'll feed those to us through the question sessions, and we'll try to answer as many as we can, time permitted. If we do not get to you in the session, we will definitely send you an email and take care of it that way. So with that, I will hand it over to Michael, who will introduce our company and dive into the storyline. So, Michael?
All right, thank you very much, Aparna, and welcome everyone. So let me quickly tell a little bit about SECUDE, where we came from, and why we think we have expertise in that area. SECUDE was founded in '96 between SAP and a German research institute called Fraunhofer. It's basically like the MIT of Germany, if you will. And back in the days, SAP wasn't really that much concerned with data protection. They were an ERP company and still are. But some of their customers demanded more security, and specifically data in transit encryption between the SAP front end, also known as SAP GUI, and the SAP backend, as well as the communication between application servers. The project was called Security Development Environment, or short SECUDE. And the result of that project was what is today known as Secure Network Communication, or SNC. SNC is basically the SSL for SAP, and it allows you to encrypt data in transit. And later on, it turned out that you can also use the very same technology for single sign-on. And that's what made SECUDE really successful, because what we did is we allowed SAP to give away SNC technology, specifically the SAP cryptographic library, to their customers free of charge, but only to protect application server to application server communication. If someone wanted to encrypt SAP GUI to backend application server traffic and use it for single sign-on, they had to get a license from SECUDE. And that's what we've been selling over the past couple of years. And the single sign-on product we had was back in the days called Secure Login. Some of you may remember that name. Along the way, we acquired a bunch of other data protection technologies. We developed some smart code management, enterprise single sign-on, full disk encryption, and so on and so forth. But by now, we've spun off all of those technologies. And in 2011, SAP approached us again and said, hey, our customers don't really see why, after spending a couple of millions with SAP, they have to go to a third party to get single sign-on and front-end to back-end encryption. So SAP acquired our whole portfolio around SAP technology. They took over some of our engineers and quality control personnel, and they are now marketing what used to be called Secure Login as SAP Single Sign-On. They recently renamed it from SAP NetWeaver Single Sign-On to just SAP Single Sign-On. But it's basically SECUDE's technology with some enhancement and a new logo on it. After we've sold our single sign-on solution to SAP and spun off some of our other technologies, we thought about what can we do next that would leverage our expertise in the data protection world, as well as our very close relationship with SAP. And with the help of some of the SAP folks that sit in our advisory board, we identified one white spot, so to say, that is related to unstructured data leaving SAP and how to secure that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later towards the end of the presentation. But let's get going with mobility. There are two fascinating pictures, I think, on that slide. One from 2005, the other one from 2013, both of St. Peter's Square. And the difference is amazing. In 2005, there is next to no mobile device that you can see on the picture. In 2013, there are probably more mobile devices in the air than there are hands. It's amazing. And our marketing team also dug out two interesting statistics. One that says that 83% of people sleep next to their cell phones. And when I do the presentation in an audience, I typically ask who of you sleeps next to the cell phones as well, and most people raise their hands. And I'm included in that statistic. So I sleep next to my cell phone as well for various reasons. Of course, I want to make a phone call in case of an emergency. I want to be reachable by family in case of an emergency. My family is from Europe, my wife's family from Central America. So given the time difference and everything, we want to have our phones nearby. 29% of Americans say their phone is the first and last thing they look at every day. And I have to include myself there as well, even though I'm not American. Because before I go to bed, I may check social media. I check my emails for a last time. I may read the news. And in the morning, pretty much the same thing in reverse. The only difference is that I've learned the hard way that I first check if my wife's already up, and if she is, I better say good morning to her first before grabbing my phone. But other than that, it's pretty much the same thing. Now, for some people, that has led to a device obsession where they always have to be online. And you may know that feeling that, if you look at your phone and you don't have any reception or you don't have good reception, it doesn't feel well because your smartphone turns into a dumb phone more or less if it's not connected to any type of network or internet. And in addition to that, some people, they always have to be on their phone, be it, during a lunch break or at a dinner table. In our house, actually, we had to come up with a rule that, no phones or mobile devices, be it a tablet or a phone on the table, because you very easily end up just, on the device rather than communicating with each other. The last statistic here, I think, is that says that 15% bring their devices to vacation is actually relatively low given the boom of bring your own device. In my case, it's not a matter of am I going to bring a device, it's what device am I going to bring. Of course, my phone is always with me. Most of the time my tablet is, and the only decision I make before a trip is am I going to bring the laptop or not. And for many of you, that's the same situation. Now, what does bring your own device mean? Well, I think most of you know what it means. It basically means that instead of using an employer-issued device, you buy your own. You pick what makes most sense for you. You may even pick the application and then use it for work. And there is no stopping. I think at some point, most enterprises or companies are not going to ask themselves the question, am I going to participate in BYOD? The question is going to be, how am I going to participate? Under what conditions and circumstances? But why BYOD in the first place? Well, from an employee perspective, there are a couple of advantages. It offers flexibility, efficiency, control. If you can pick the device that you're most comfortable with and most productive with, well, then your satisfaction increases and, of course, the productivity. Nicer to work with the tools that you feel most comfortable with, rather than getting a device or a platform that you don't like at all. From an employer perspective, Cisco says there is a cost reduction between $300 and $1,300 per employee if you allow BYOD. Productivity increases if your employees can use the tools that they feel most comfortable with. And as I've mentioned before, employee satisfaction. And a satisfied employee is certainly better than one that doesn't like the tools he or she has to work with. Now, from an end-user perspective, the number of devices they use is going to increase. For the most part, or for many, it's already 3, a phone, a tablet, and a laptop. It's at least 2, I want to say, today already. The workspace is also changing. You no longer have to be tied to an office to get your work done. As long as you have connectivity, you can pretty much work from wherever you want to. Now, true, you may be most productive in a given environment with proper connectivity and everything, but really you can work from wherever you want to as long as you have connectivity and the mobile devices you need for that. It's also a fact that corporate data is going to end up on personal devices if you allow it or not. So instead of ignoring it and just saying, well, we have a policy against storing personal information corporate information on personal devices, we think it's better to do it the right way and to have proper policies in place. And that's especially true for the younger generation because they are less likely to obey policies than the average employee. From an IT trends perspective, security has become a top concern because the less control you have over the devices and ultimately over the data, the higher the risk is. And the whole fragmentation in terms of different operating systems, different flavors of a given operating system like Android, for example, certainly doesn't help. Now let's look at some of the top issues with bring your own device. Security, obviously. If you have no control or very limited control over a device and your data, then security becomes a real concern. But also privacy. I know a number of coworkers, or not necessarily coworkers, but people working for other companies that I interact with, and they choose to get a employer-issued device in addition to having their personal device, despite the company offering a BYOD policy. And the reason is because they say, you know what, I don't want the company to have any control over my personal device. You know, I don't want them to snoop around or to be able to wipe the device in case it's lost or stolen. You know, just imagine if you don't have a proper backup of your pictures or personal pictures or whatever, and you lose your phone, and the company decides because it also contains corporate information to simply wipe the phone, you know, you may lose personal data, and some people don't want that. Support issues and infrastructure issues, of course. You know, just think about the number of mobile platforms from BlackBerry to iOS, Android, Windows Phone, the different flavors of Android. It becomes quite complex. And that's why it's not necessarily surprising that some refer to BYOD as bring your own disaster, because it can very quickly result in a disaster if you don't do it properly, or if you just say, hey, we don't allow it, and ignore the fact that people are doing it anyway. If you don't have mobile device management and proper policies in place, many employees don't use passcodes or passwords on their devices, especially on mobile phones. They lend devices to relatives, for example, or friends. You know, just imagine your mother-in-law coming in and say, hey, you know, can you give me your laptop real quick? I want to get the latest recipe for whatever. Of course, you're not going to say no. You know, you give her the laptop, and you know, who knows, you know, where exactly she is going, and if she intentionally, unintentionally, you know, gets the computer infected with the virus. You know, people do that. They lose devices, of course, and that applies to both the BYOD and the non-BYOD environments. So the main BYOD security concerns, of course, top of the list, loss of data, especially if it's financially related data, client information, personal identifiable information, but also unauthorized access to systems, you know, malware, and so on and so forth. I mean, most of those threats or concerns apply to non-BYOD type of environments as well. But the risk is certainly greater if you have not as much control over the devices and the applications and the data as you do with BYOD. Now, I think we all agree that it's not the device and the application that's most critical, it's the data, or most valuable. The more surprising it is, however, that there are many security solutions or data protection solutions out there that focus on securing the device, locking it down, making sure it's encrypted, or locking down the applications with strong authentication and so on and so forth. But not that many data protection solutions focus on the data itself. And we're going to get to that in a bit. Here is another interesting statistic that's related to storing data and how the younger generation versus the average worker stores work-related files on personal devices. There is a good gap when it comes to storing work files on personal laptops. There is a huge gap on personal smartphones and a relatively small gap on tablets. And I think that is somewhat related to the amount of those respective devices being in use. Everyone has a smartphone, and of course, you can use it for to access your your corporate email, or use Dropbox or OneDrive to store work-related files. Not everyone has a tablet, and most don't consider using a tablet to get work done. Maybe that's changing now with the introduction of Office for iPad, but up until now, the iPad was more like a social media, reading news type of device, and same with other tablets as well. And many have a laptop that they get work done. Now, the IT challenge really is that the corporate perimeter is changing. Some say it has eroded. It is eroding, but it's definitely changing, and it has changed. As soon as you issue a mobile device, your perimeter has already changed, because most likely you have access to corporate information that's somehow stored inside of that perimeter. So knowing where your data goes has become a huge challenge, not only for data that originates from within the perimeter, but especially for data that's created outside of that perimeter. So keeping track of all of that is next to impossible. And there is one statement that Dan Faustina, the head of the Microsoft Rights Management Initiative, said, data exists to be consumed. And that's very important, because it implies that just locking everything down and disallowing everything that has to do with collaboration and sharing and so on and so forth is not really the answer, because people need to get their work done and they need to consume the data. And it's not only people that need to consume the data, it's software that consumes data and processes it in an automated way. So you can't really prevent all of that. And I think at this point we're going to have a quick break and see if there are any questions. Aparna?
Looks like this is some well-understood content so far, Michael, so no questions on this portion.
Very good. Okay, now let's look at data protection from a layered perspective. So there is the network layer, and you can protect the network using solutions like data loss prevention, firewalls, virtual private networks, and so on. There is the storage layer, which includes full disk encryption, database encryption, USB thumb drive encryption, and so on and so forth. And then there is the file layer, which is what I've mentioned before. If the data itself is the most valuable asset, then why not focus on the data itself? So it doesn't matter where the data is traveling, if it's stored on a local hard drive or in a cloud storage container, or if it's traveling over the network. And we're going to go into each of those here in more detail. First, network-centric solutions. Of course, you need a firewall, because even if your perimeter has eroded or has changed, there are still assets left inside of that changed perimeter that you want to protect from the outside. You also need, or you may need, DLP, data leakage prevention, loss prevention. And we've seen that the monitoring capabilities of DLP are quite good. So you get a good understanding of where your data is going, especially for data that originates from within the perimeter. The problem is that the monitoring capabilities of DLP sometimes produce so much information that it's very hard to see the trees within in the forest. So it is good, but too much of it can be a problem as well. The prevention capability of DLP is a little bit of an issue because typically DLP sits too far away from where the data is created, and it very easily leads to user frustration. So imagine, as an example, someone downloads a file from SAP or a report from SAP and then tries to store it on a file server or share it with someone, and DLP intercepts and says, no, you cannot do that. It quarantines the file. The user gets an email that the operation wasn't successful. Then the user has to call the help desk to look for an alternative route on how the data can be shared. Many times we have seen the prevention capability of DLP being disabled and reduced to the monitoring capabilities to reduce user frustration. In VPN, of course, if you want to provide secure access into your perimeter or whatever is left of it, you want to have VPN as well. So all those three are good technologies, but they don't really solve the issue of collaboration and mobility with respect to... I'm getting some background noise now.
Yeah, we have a participant that seems unmuted. So if you don't mind, everybody make sure to mute.
I wonder how that's even possible, how you can come in as an attendee and not be muted. Interesting. Okay, so all of those network-centric solutions you certainly want to have, and they are necessary, but they don't provide the protection of data in a mobile and BYOD type of environment. So let's look at storage-centric solutions. With the introduction of laptops, people ask for drive encryption or disk encryption for a good reason, because if you lose your laptop or if it's stolen, you want to make sure your data is protected. So FDE, full disk encryption, offers great power of protection. It makes sure your data is secure while the computer is off or in hibernation mode. But full disk encryption, for example, does not offer any protection if the computer is up and running. So if I would step out of my office now while my computer is up and running, showing the presentation here, and someone would step up to the computer while the screen is not locked, all my data would be completely unprotected. Because for the operating system with FDE, everything appears to be in clear text. Only if the computer is shut down, your data is secure, because you have to authenticate before the operating system starts, before the encryption-decryption driver is provided with the correct key to make everything available in clear text. So it doesn't provide any data, any protection of data in use or data in transit. Database encryption is very similar. It helps you if someone yanks out the disk drive with the database on it, tries to access it. That way everything is protected. But if you go in the correct route, meaning through the proper authentication, and you would see everything in clear text. Now, mobile device encryption is special for a number of reasons. I remember when SECUDE used to have a full disk encryption solution, we were often asked, so can you encrypt my iPhone as well? Or can you encrypt my Android device? And the answer is, no, you can't. But also, you don't have to. And here it's very important that you have a mobile device management solution in place, not to encrypt the phone, because it's not possible, but to enforce the security and data protection capabilities the platform provides. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this using iOS and iPhones as an example, because that's the platform I'm most familiar with. But most of what I'm saying applies to all the other, or most of the other platforms as well. So let's step back for a second and look at how full disk encryption works on a laptop, and then compare why it's not possible to do the exact same thing on a mobile device. Well, on a laptop with disk encryption, when you boot the system up, you're asked to authenticate. either using username and password or a smart card or a thumbprint, whatever it may be. You have to give the software a piece of information that it can use to derive the encryption key, hand it over to a driver, and then the operating system can start, and all the data read off the disk is tunneled through the driver and automatically decrypted. So everything appears to be in clear text for the operating system. The important part here is that you have to provide user input before the operating system starts. On a mobile phone, you obviously can't do that. You cannot intercept the boot process of a phone to type in a password or a passcode in order to feed the encryption driver. The only way to kind of intercept the boot process is by jailbreaking the phone. And you obviously don't want to bypass security of a phone, to add security. That doesn't make any sense. So it's not possible to encrypt the whole phone, or a tablet for that matter. But the good news is most modern devices come with built-in encryption capabilities. On iOS, starting with the iPhone 3GS, it comes with a built-in hardware-based encryption chip. And because it is hardware, it is significantly faster and more secure than anything you could do in software. And the only way, or the only thing that you have to do is to, in order to enable that protection and the encryption of all the data on the device, is to set a passcode. And that's something that you can enforce using mobile device management. So you want to use mobile device management to look at all the data protection capabilities that the platform you're dealing with supports, and then enforcing some of those features, like, for example, a good passcode. And by good passcode, I don't necessarily mean a 4-digit numeric passcode, because that can be brute forced, meaning guessed in about 40 minutes using software that's technically only available to law enforcement, but I'm sure to anyone as well with enough money. So 4-digit numeric only is better than not having anything, and it probably prevents the average Joe from getting into your phone. But someone with the means and the money to acquire that software, I think it's around maybe $10,000 or so, they can bypass your 4-digit numeric passcode in about 40 minutes. So you want to have a longer passcode. On iOS, the problem is if you disable that simple passcode feature in the settings, then what you get is, instead of the numbers only to input your passcode, you get the full keyboard. And if you have fingers like I have, it's very difficult to quickly type in a complex passcode on the tiny keyboard. Now, the workaround for that is, what you can do is, when you are asked on that full-size keyboard or on that full keyboard to type in your longer than 4-digit passcode, type in, for example, 6 digits, but numbers only. And that way, when you unlock your phone, when you swipe to unlock, instead of seeing that full keyboard, you only see the numbers. And typing in 6 numbers is just as quick, almost, as typing in 4. And cracking a 6-digit numeric passcode takes 2 years. So you've significantly increased security while getting all the hardware-based encryption, while still keeping usability significantly higher than you would if you used a complex passcode consisting of characters, numbers, and special characters, and so on. Now, the second thing that some mobile device management solutions try to accomplish is to encrypt specific data on a mobile device. The problem is, on most of those platforms, they use features that are called application sandboxing. So in other words, the mail application or a third-party application running on your iOS device has no access whatsoever, at least not with iOS 7 and older, to any of the data of a different application, because they are sandboxed, they are contained within itself. So again, for security reasons. And so you cannot write an application or an app that encrypts another application's data. It's simply not possible. So mobile device management solutions, what they did is they came up with so-called containers. So you can create an encrypted container and then ask your user nicely, when they receive important data or an important attachment or a sensitive attachment by email, for example, to stick it into that container and then, I don't know, delete the email. That's obviously not very user-friendly, and there are not many that are really doing that. And again, it's not really necessary. Enforce your passcode, and then you have your whole device encrypted using header-based encryption, very secure, very performant, and that's really all you need. So that's what I would recommend, or what we would recommend you want to use mobile device management solutions for. Next one is data-centric solutions. So what if there was a solution where that could help you encrypt or protect the information so it doesn't matter where it goes? Be it on a mobile device, be it in cloud storage, wherever it may be, if the protection is persistent and travels with the data, it doesn't really matter where it ends up. And back in the days, and still available, the PGP technology was known to provide file-centric encryption. The problem is with PGP and most other file-based encryption technologies, they either rely on a password, like a zip with a password, or they're based on keys. If it's password-based, like if you use WinZip and password protect the file, then you have to transmit the password to the recipient of the protected information. They type in the password, decrypt or unzip the file, and then again, it's unprotected on the recipient's computer, and you have lost all control over what that recipient can do with the data. And the same is with PGP, but what you add with PGP is the whole key management. You have to exchange public keys, you have to revoke potentially keys. So it's all become very, very cumbersome. Good idea on paper, but not really usable in an enterprise type of environment. Now, rights management, also known as DRM or digital rights management in the movie and music industry, or IRM, information rights management in the IT world, has a solution to that. It provides protection, meaning encryption plus policy. So you can not only control who can open the data, the protected data, but you can also control what the recipient can do with it, meaning save unprotected, edit, print, copy, paste, and so on and so forth. You can also add an expiration date. So you can say that person can open that file for the next 7 days, but beyond those 7 days, the person can't open that file anymore, the protected data. And there are a number of more or less established IRM solutions out there. One is from Adobe Lifecycle Manager, works for PDF only, unfortunately, and hasn't really seen any major development lately, so it's probably in maintenance mode or something like that. Oracle acquired a solution called Sealed Media a while back, and they have stopped development as well. And then there is Microsoft with its rights management services. That solution has been around for many years. Unfortunately, it has never been widely deployed. And the main reason for that is that it lacked key features that would make the solution work in a modern, meaning mobile, BYOD, collaborative type of environment. One of the main issues was that it worked for Microsoft Office type documents only. And we all know Microsoft Office is not the only file format out there. There are PDFs, there are text files, there are XML files, there are JPEGs, movies, CAD drawings, you name it. It didn't work on any mobile platform, so it only worked on Windows, desktops, and laptops. Collaboration meant that you had to establish a trust relationship between the person protecting the information and the recipient. So if you wanted to securely collaborate with a business partner, you had to establish a trust relationship between those two Active Directories. And doing that one time may be okay, but if you have to do that for a huge number of partners and external recipients of the protected information, it becomes a nightmare in terms of management, and nobody really wants to do that. And so there were a number of issues with rights management for Microsoft. The good news is that all of those issues have been resolved. So about 1.5 years ago, Microsoft decided to reinvest in RMS, rights management services. And the current version of RMS works on all major mobile platforms, and that includes Windows Phone, iOS, Android, and they're in talks with RIM, BlackBerry. Not sure if that's going to go anywhere, but at least there are some talks going on. It works with any file type, so you can RMS protect any file, be it Office, PDF, CAD drawing, XML, your own file format that you may have created as part of your own development. Collaboration has been made really, really easy. So companies can now easily collaborate without having to establish a trust relationship between them. The only trust relationship you have to establish is between you and Microsoft acts like as a broker and establishes the relationship with all the other partners. You can also now collaborate between businesses and individuals. So a business can RMS protect a file for a Yahoo ID or a Life ID or in the future Facebook and Gmail, and then that person on the other end has all that they have to do is authenticate to their respective identity provider, again, Yahoo, Gmail, Life ID, and consume the protected information. And even among individuals, you can now share encrypted and protected information. So I could share a Word document, RMS protected with my wife, without having to set up anything. So all those roadblocks have been removed, and the result is a data-centric solution that allows you to protect information no matter where it goes. So if you protect your files, they may end up on a mobile device, on an Android or an iOS device. You can consume them from there easily. Or they can end up in cloud storage, and it doesn't matter either, because you don't have to worry anymore about protecting all those outlets, all those channels, all those different cloud storage providers. All you have to do is you protect what's most valuable, your data, and forget about the storage containers and the network and so on and so forth, at least concerning the data you want to protect. Of course, you want to keep your network security and everything in place for all the data that's not RMS protected, but for everything that's RMS protected, you don't have to worry about the outer layers anymore. So again, it doesn't matter if it's on-prem, collaborative environment shared with partners, end up in an email, printer, mobile device, everything is secure. And you have full control over what the recipient or the recipients can do with the information. If they can open it in the first place, of course, you can define if they can edit, if they can print, forward, if it's an email, copy, paste, and so on and so forth. And here we're going to have another quick break for questions.
All right, I've got a couple, and I'm going to pare them down. Let's see, how do you open RMS protected documents on mobile devices?
Right, good question. Basically using an app that Microsoft is providing for free in the respective app store, be it Google Play or the Apple App Store. You download that application. If you get an RMS protected file, you open it in that application, and there you go. In addition to that, on Android, the email client has RMS capabilities built in. So if you get an RMS protected email or an email attachment, you can just view or render the information inside of the native email client. Apple, as we all know, is a little bit more restrictive when it comes to doing things that partners like Microsoft want. So the mail client on iOS right now does not have RMS capabilities built in natively. So you have to open, if you get an attachment in that Microsoft application that Microsoft is providing for free. And there are also some partner companies of us, like, for example, Titus. They have an email client that basically replicates the native iOS client and is fully RMS enabled as well. And I know that Microsoft is currently working on making Office for iPad RMS compatible. So in the next or one of the next updates of Office for iPad, you'll see RMS capabilities built in as well. So if you have an RMS protected Word document, PowerPoint, Excel spreadsheet, whatever it may be, it renders natively in Office for iPad.
Okay, awesome. And the next question, which I think is a good one, is, so this attendee has Office 365 deployed, and they have Active Directory, it seems, on-premise.
Right.
Will that still work with the situation in terms of opening documents?
Yes, of course. So, Microsoft is certainly providing support for RMS, RMS on-prem environments where everything, including Active Directory, is on-premise. That certainly works. That has been available for the past 10 years or so. And with Microsoft's Azure cloud platform, what they also support is full Azure. So if you have Active Directory, RMS, Exchange, whatever you may have, all in the cloud, fully supported. And then there is the hybrid approach that you've just mentioned, where some of it may be on-prem, some of it may be in the cloud, and that's certainly fully supported as well.
All right. In the interest of time, let's keep rolling.
Okay. So let's talk about what that means for unstructured data leaving SAP and then ending up on mobile devices or in the cloud on Dropbox, OneDrive, whatever it may be. And that's that new solution that we've been working on. We call it Halocore for SAP NetWeaver. It's a solution that works on top of Microsoft Rights Management and on top of SAP, of course. And what it basically does is it intercepts downloads from SAP, automatically classifies the information, and then automatically applies protection or suggests a protection to the end user, depending on your configuration. So the bottom line basically is that whatever documents or whatever data leaves SAP in an unstructured format, and by that I mean files, be it a report exported as Excel or files downloaded that were previously attached in SAP somewhere to an article stem, for example, get automatically intercepted, classified, and protected. And what you end up with the protection, compliance, and if you are in a compliance regulated industry, for example, and full auditing capabilities. So you'll see what data was protected using which protection template. If a user downloaded something unprotected, which is an option that you can enable for end users. And instead of talking, all about that, let's quickly hand over to Aparna. She's going to show you a demo video of how that looks using SAP GUI as a front end. User logs in, downloads information, and how Halocore intercepts and protects it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Aparna. And if you don't mind, Aparna, I'm going to start the video here.
I'm going to get off on playing that for a second. I just
okay.
We'll go through the quick, easy steps on it. But anyways, thanks for all that information, Michael. I think that was a comprehensive and relevant look into most of the issues surrounding this BYOD explosion. And by the way, I have to grudgingly admit that I'm a part of quite a few of those statistics you'd mentioned early on about waking up to your iPhone, taking a look at it, making sure my email's there. So yeah, in terms of productivity, it's a great tool, but personally, I'm sure I have to scale back a little bit. So folks, we've looked into the trends and what it means to you and your organization. And obviously there are definite benefits, but as well as there's some tangible challenges associated with these trends, and most of them have to do with the need to protect data. That's a consequence of adopting all this technology into our lives personally and professionally. So as mentioned, SECUDE, once we sold off our single sign-on, this has kind of been our focus. We've been looking into this very issue as it pertains to persistent data protection for that unstructured information leaving SAP. So our solution, Halocore, could potentially fit into your organization's security portfolio as a mitigation against such data loss. And we do so using the best file-based protection method out there, as Michael mentioned, which is Microsoft's Rights Management. So in this video clip, I'm going to quickly demonstrate some of the feature benefits of Halocore, and yes, you can go ahead and play that, Michael. And we'll take you through 3 different parts. In the first part, we're going to show you a standard SAP procedure of someone logging on and getting a file out of SAP and trying to download it. The second part is the Halocore user experience, and the third part is actually opening up that RMS-protected content on the back end. So right now, what you're taking a look at is that first part. user goes in, he's an HR employee, opens up goes into SAP GUI, opens up a flexible employee data report. And with most organizations, HR tends to have the most sensitive information, obviously, because it contains a ton of PII, a lot of your information, Social Security numbers, compensation, pay, whatever HR might keep on file about you in their database. So this happens to be an area of concern that we've come across. So here the user goes in and pulls it. I'm going to pause this right here for a second. This is the second part. So he pulls the report. He wants to download it for some kind of a processing application on the front end. Now here what you're seeing in the pause snapshot is the Halocore user interface. This is what the user would experience when downloading. Halocore will intercept that request, and this is a complete configurable UI. What you're looking at here in the first tab is company policies. So one of the features of Halocore is it takes a look at the attributes, and in this case, it would be the attributes of the flexible employee data that's being downloaded, and it kind of throws them into a algorithm, a kind of a data mining algorithm, and it basically pairs that with the appropriate RMS templates that already applies, and it puts them in the company policies list. So for a user, he's to look at pre-filtered versions of policies that will apply to his data, and all he has to do with a simple click is choose the correct one, and he's good to go. A second feature of the Halocore solution is the My Policies tab. So for users that are authorized to do so, now this is, once again, completely configurable, so if your company doesn't want to have this authority granted to people to make ad hoc policies, that can be taken away. But in the My Policies tab, the user can go and favorite certain policies. For example, this HR gentleman can go ahead and put an HR policy that he consistently uses in the My Policies tab under Favorites. Another great use of the My Policy is for, say, projects. So if he's working on a project which requires a bunch of different users from other functional groups to be involved to take a look at that information, he can create that ad hoc policy and let it run for the duration of the project. Another feature is the Save Unprotected. So if you look in the bottom right hand of the UI, you'll see three buttons, yellow. One of them is the Save Unprotected. That also is completely configurable and can be thrown out of there, so the user doesn't see it at all. But if they do have the option to Save Unprotected, a dialog box will pop up, and the user has to input a reason as to why they're saving that particular file unprotected. Now, all this information gets plugged or logged back into a logging feature that Halocore also provides. So you can go back in and audit it and take a look at all Save Unprotected files and the reasons for why that happened. And I think that's a great add-on for the auditors within the company. Another feature that we could also do, and this is more for a company policy type of a thing, is user doesn't have to experience this at all. So they download something from SAP and it's transparent. The policy application applies, Halocore does that automatically without actually having to put the UI in front of them. So those are a couple of ways we can actually work with Halocore and give them a quick, forcible way to protect that information persistently. So let's go ahead and continue with this demo. So that's it. So in this case, the user will choose an internal read-only policy. And then part 3 of the video is someone opening up that particular file containing all that important HR information on the front end. And you can tell it's protected by the yellow bar that's across the front end of the Excel sheet. You can see where it says internal read only. And to take a look at what those particular permissions are, you just go in and click on the View Permissions, and this particular user can view, but he cannot edit, he cannot copy, he can print this document, he can't save, export, and so on and so forth based on the policies you've applied. Once again, very simple solution to a complex problem, really, of being able to persistently protect this information at a file level. So from here, where do we go? Well, if you remember, I mentioned the logging capability of Halocore. So we actually provide a way to log every single download that's coming out of your SAP system. This is a part of the Halocore full protection package that auditors will probably find very useful, but we also package it in a different tool called the Data Export Auditor. So this will be only the logging capability of it, and we're offering that up for free. And the reason we're doing that is for letting you guys go ahead and implement this into your SAP systems. It's an enhancement code. It plugs into one of the function modules. Let it run for a little while, and that way you can actually look at the logs and see what information is leaving your SAP system. And this is great stuff for you to be able to actually pinpoint areas that you would definitely need some extra security. And to do so, just, you know what, go to SECUDE.com or just email us right after this presentation, and we will be able to help you out with getting you set up with the Data Export Auditor. Let me show you what this actually looks like. I've been talking about the log. So the log actually stores all this information in SQL tables, and you can customize it because it's got the ALV grid layout format that you guys are probably used to if you're using SAP. So you can take a look at, you can customize it based on what exactly you want to take a look at, if it's transaction codes, if it's which functional group it's coming out of, what user groups it's coming out of. You can do all sorts of configurations within the log and make sure that it fits your needs within your organization. And if you skip to the next slide, I'll show you exactly what the log looks like, and here it is. So in this particular log, there's obviously date and time, the username, the transaction code that was used to grab the information, what that actually means, the text associated with the code, which functional group it came from, the file name, path, and file size. So once again, a great tool that will help you guys get up and running with learning more about the downloads happening from your systems. So with that, I'm going to open it up to some questions that have come in. And, all right, so what is the minimum requirement to get this up and running? Well, let me start out with what exactly is involved in actually getting this set up. So for minimum requirements, you'll need the SAP NetWeaver 7.0 and higher or newer. On the Windows side, you'll need a server that's 2008 R2 or maybe 2012 R2 are requirements. So in terms of architecture, where does this fit in? You obviously need your Active Directory domain and your RMS, AD RMS cluster in place. Once you have that in place, Halocore is a simple client-server architecture. And what that means is the Halocore client actually sits in your SAP application server ABAP. So it's a code that plugs in to one of the function modules, and in this case, it'll plug into the GUI download function module. And what that does is any user that's actually using the SAP GUI to download information, the Halocore client will intercept that, as we saw in the demo, and it will take that whole file via web service and transfer it down to the Halocore server, which is the Windows Server component of it. On that server, you have a local RMS SDK, and you get all the necessary cryptographic information to encrypt the file based on the policy, and then it gets downloaded. So it's a very simple architecture, and it works well with any Microsoft Rights Management umbrella that you have. So for instance, if you guys are doing like the Office 365 question, if you're using Azure Rights Management, we have a scenario there. And if you've got on-prem with the Windows Active Directory Rights Management Services, we can work with that as well. So that's basically all you need. Once you align those three, you're ready to go. So the other one is a similar question: what sort of SAP applications does that support? Well, anything on the NetWeaver ABAP stack is what we support. Once again, if you guys have any more questions, I don't see any more coming in, definitely give us a shout out, and we'll be more than happy to ping you guys back. And also, this webinar is being recorded, so it'll be available to all the attendees and whomsoever you wish to show. And we are raffling off a $50 gift card, I believe, at the end of this. So thank you for everybody for your attention, and everybody who's hung on for it. You're probably going to be put into a raffle, what you are, and we will announce that winner by email. So thanks. Hopefully you guys have learned something about securing data in your mobile world. So just please give us a shout out for working with the DEA, which is our data export auditor, and we'll be happy to get you started.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.